What's up, addicts? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. Special edition for you guys today. Went on to a panel with 3 other fantasy football analysts to discuss all of the major changes that took place to the fantasy landscape due to free agency. But not going to waste any more time. Let's.
Welcome back, weirdos. A very weird fantasy coming at you live from home. The world shut down, but fantasy football does not sleep. Fish sleep, sharks eat. While we're forced to isolate, we're going to go ahead and give you something that you can consume, that you can stream while you're kicking back at your home, such as us. So the world is going nuts. The fantasy football world is going nuts. Carolina did a bunch of stuff today. Good, bad, I don't know. But in case you guys have not been on our channel before, my name is Josh. I'm one half of a very weird fantasy football. My other half, Jake, he's out saving the world as a firefighter. But we're going to go ahead and get into everything. If you are from the Missouri area, you may know us from our Jock 98.7 ESPN radio show. Now we're going national through our podcast and our YouTube broadcast, such as what you're listening to and watching right now. But as I mentioned, there's a ton of stuff that we're going to talk about. And fortunately for us, we brought a panel of people in the industry to kind of break this down for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the horn and allow everybody to introduce themselves. Jim, how about you give us something? Introduce yourselves. Tell me what you're all about, my friend.
Well, hello there. It's thank you very much for having me on today. My name is Jimmy Maverick, and I have the website Fantasy Football Maverick. I am obsessed with fantasy football, especially the draft. I love it so much that I created an app called My Perfect Fantasy Draft to help you on draft day to right decisions and find the right players.
That's awesome. So you have an app. All right, I'm going to have to make sure that I talk to you after the show, and we're gonna see what's going on with that. So, Jim, Fantasy Football Maverick, you're going to go and hand off to Mike. Mike, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey guys, this is Michael from the Fantasy Addiction Network. I don't have an app yet, so I will also have to be speaking with Jim, but got a website up right now, and really the main focus of what I'm trying to get at is I know there's a lot of people out there with busy lives that love fantasy football that don't have the same amount of time that us weirdos have to be able to spend analyzing everything. So my goal is to give information in bite-sized chunks and like very small pieces so that people can consume it quickly, because a lot of the information out there is hard to eat because there's just so much of it. So just trying to analyze it and pull it into very small pieces so it just gets you that information quickly. So that's who I'm reaching.
And you do a really, really good job at that. Why don't you pass the ball over to Limelight? Limelight, tell us about yourself. Okay, well, let me give you guys a little update as to what's going on. Our buddy, Fantasy Football Limelight. Did I say it right? Nod your head, yes. Okay. He is in his house. Okay, so we are all having to chill out here in our own homes. There's a major storm going up above. That storm is hitting his house in a very weird way. We're going to come up at him in a little bit, get a little bit more details about what he's about, but I will tell you that he has a fantastic brand. He has an incredible social presence and some really good opinions. Speaking of opinions, we're going to go ahead and jump right into what's going on with Carolina. So, in case you guys have been sleeping under a rock, which we all are, essentially, right now, we have the Carolina Panthers today. They traded Kyle Allen for a 5th-round draft pick. If that wasn't enough, they signed Robbie Anderson today to a 2-year, $20 million contract. And if that wasn't enough, they released Cam Newton. Who wants to kind of give us their first synopsis as to what is going on? Raise your hand if you're sure. How about Jim? Why don't you give us something? Don't raise your hand. Just give us something.
Well, I got to tell you, man, for me, Cam Newton is this year's Andrew Luck. All right. He's a guy that's been dealing with injuries for so many years now, so many surgeries. He just can't seem to be coming back to where he's healthy. Mm-hmm. He can't get out of the rehab phase. And frankly, it's very sad for me to see Cam Newton gone from the Panthers because he's one of my favorite players. But I got to say, when they signed Teddy Bridgewater, I was jumping up and down and cheering because that is the best possible quarterback to come in and help that franchise. And I think they're in a real winning situation right now, definite upgrade, and I think they're going to be great this year.
I like that. Teddy Bridgewater is he is a good he's 28 years old. Michael, why don't you kind of give us your opinion? Let me ask you a question. Do you think that Teddy Bridgewater is the type of quarterback that's going to get the ball to these new running back or these new wide receivers that was just signed?
Yeah, I think I might have a slightly different take here than Jim, just in terms of I like Teddy Bridgewater. I liked him coming out of college, and that knee injury that he suffered with Minnesota a few years back was pretty brutal. So personally, like from a player standpoint, I love seeing him get this opportunity. But I'm not sure, especially now that you have Curtis Samuel and Robbie Anderson, both guys that are known, to be targeted deep down the field. I don't know if you think Teddy Bridgewater is exactly the answer for that. In the 6 games that we saw Teddy Bridgewater play last year for the Saints, he only averaged 2.5 deep ball attempts and was only averaging about 230 yards per game. Now, that could have been partially the system because we know with Drew Brees there, they play it pretty close to the line of scrimmage. They haven't really aired it out too much over the course of the past couple of years, so maybe they were just using Drew Brees' playbook. But even in his time in Minnesota, we haven't really ever seen Teddy Bridgewater push the issue and go deep down the field. So I think this is really good news for guys like Christian McCaffrey, who's going to get a lot of dump-off opportunities. DJ Moore is truly the alpha there. And I think Ian Thomas is definitely going to see an uptick in targets as well. But especially now with Robbie Anderson coming in there, I think that just takes both Curtis Samuel and Robbie Anderson's value and just brings it basically to the ground floor until one of these guys can either show the other one up or one of them gets hurt. But overall, what's really interesting for me on this team is just how bad this defense is looking. They're going to have to score a lot of points, and maybe they'll be able to coach Teddy Bridgewater into throwing the ball deep downfield because they're going to be coming from behind a lot this year.
And I'm in agreement with you when it comes down to Carolina. Teddy Bridgewater has not, as you mentioned, thrown the ball down the field very much or with much success. Now you have two guys that essentially feast in the deep game. They feast. This really minimizes DJ Moore's value. This also, well, let's face it, Robbie Anderson's a decoy at this point. Lime, are you doing good over there?
Yeah, I should be good right now.
All right.
For a minute, we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually like the signing, man. I agree. He doesn't chunk it deep a whole lot, but I think he has something to prove coming in. His career hasn't gone how he's wanted it to. Now he has an opportunity. It's his team. They signed him to be the guy. They're giving him necessary weapons to succeed. I think Ian Thomas, I like him a lot this year. I think he breaks out. Being that Teddy doesn't throw it deep a whole lot, that intermediate routes would be great for Ian. I think DJ Moore's still the guy. They're going to find ways to get him the ball. This is great for McCaffrey. I'm liking the offense a lot. And as you guys said, Robbie Anderson, he won't be very relevant in fantasy, in my opinion. And Curtis Samuel basically just it hurt him pretty bad. It just phased him completely out. But from a real life standpoint, I think this offense is good to go.
Gun to your head. Gun to your head, Lime. Gun to your head. Christian McCaffrey, does he – obviously he can't improve. Is he a top 2 running back this year? Gun to your head.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You heard it from Limelight. Okay, so next we have Tom Brady, who joined the Bucs. So as we all know, Tom Brady did not have that much success last year in New England. Obviously, there was a weapons issue. Clearly, he does not have that issue when it comes to being in Tampa. You have Godwin, you have Evans. Raise your hand. Who wants to cover this one? I mean, are we having a plus? Are we having a down? Or are we having to standing still? Michael, hit me.
So I'm going to give you both angles to try to cover both sides of this because I think that there's a definite discussion that needs to be had. I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say. So from a positive standpoint, we know that Winston threw a lot more uncatchable passes and interceptions. So from a team standpoint, I think that Tom Brady gives them a lot better morale. We've seen even in just the past 2 years, Brady has only thrown 16 and 17 interceptable passes, whereas last year Winston threw 49. So that's pretty ridiculous. And just overall, even though Brady didn't have a good statistical output last year, he still threw the ball 613 times compared to Jameis Winston's 626. So from like a positive standpoint, he's still throwing the ball a lot, and he's not putting it in the hands of the defenders, which Jameis Winston really liked to do. From a negative standpoint, Tom Brady has actually been really bad in terms of his completion percentage when pressured. Last year, his pressure completion percentage was about 28%. The year before, it was 24%, whereas Jameis Winston has been hovering around 40%. And Jameis Winston was actually pressured on about 7% more of his snaps than Tom Brady was last year. So we'll see if they can continue to address that offensive line. And then again, it could just be that Tom Brady's getting the ball out a little bit quicker than Jameis Winston, not hanging on to it, trying to go deep. And then, although a lot of people have been saying that Tom Brady's deep ball accuracy isn't there anymore, statistically, he's still actually hitting the deep ball pretty well. Last year, he threw 41.7% deep ball completion percentage, but the problem is he doesn't throw the ball deep very often. Last year, he only had 3.8 deep ball attempts per game. So overall, my take on it is I think Godwin will be fine. Godwin plays in the slot a lot. We know how much Brady loves the slot. Maybe this is a resurgence for O.J. Howard because we know how much Tom Brady loves to go to the tight end. But I don't see how this helps Mike Evans. Mike Evans is a contested catch guy. He doesn't create nearly as much separation. And Tom Brady doesn't throw the ball into a place where he has no business throwing it, whereas that was Jameis Winston's game. So in my opinion, I see Godwin going up. I see Howard going up and Evans declining. What do you guys say?
Boy, the Fantasy Edition deck where he's bringing the stats. I see Limelight shaking his head in a positive way. What do you have to say for us, man?
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think Godwin at least has the same value, if not going up. Definitely see Mike Evans decreasing in value. As he said, Tom Brady, he's better for the team, but as far as the deep ball, in my opinion, Jameis Winston is the perfect quarterback for a fantasy wide receiver. He slings the ball wherever. He gives any wide receiver a chance to get it. And what do you need in fantasy? You need opportunity. So, in my opinion, Jameis Winston is perfect for fantasy, but in real life, Tom Brady is much better. And I'm hoping O.J. Howard he has way too much talent to keep playing how he did the last couple seasons. I'm hoping Tom Brady is the answer to make him relevant again. But I totally agree. Mike Evans drops just a little bit in value. He's going to have to depend on what Tom Brady can give him, and it's not the deep ball very often. So I think Godwin is good.
I remember this guy named O.J. Howard. the olden days there. He's got the skills. Jim, do you have anything to add on that?
Well, I think the big X factor for O.J. Howard is Bruce Arians going to change his game plan to allow O.J. Howard to become a receiver for Tom Brady. And that's going to be an interesting thing to see because that is not in Arians' game plan. They're there to block. That's his quote about tight ends. So certainly O.J. Howard is a dark horse. And I think because of that, his ADP stays very cheap and he's certainly worth a late round pick for your team.
Sure. Lime, let me throw it back at you real quick because it seems like I've followed you now for a little bit. We seem to have quite a bit of the same ideals, the same rankings, it would seem. Gun to your head. Where do you have Mike Evans and Godwin this year?
Man, I still have Godwin top 8, and I'm bumping Evans to around. He's outside my top 10. I'm going to say maybe 12, somewhere around there. I'd have to really look at my rankings and configure them again, but just off the top of my head, I'm bumping Evans outside my top 10.
Yeah, it's early. It's early right now, so it's hard to say. While I have you before the rain kills us again, why don't you give us a little shout-out to yourself? Give yourself a shout-out. Hit me.
Yes. Fantasy Football Limelight right here. I'm working on the website. I have one, but I'm still working on it, so we'll get to that later. But follow me on Instagram, fantasyfootball.limelight. I love the fantasy community. I love helping anyone. including other fantasy pages. This is just something I've grown a passion for. Every day it's what's on my mind. My wife thinks I'm crazy, but
every day.
Hey, every day, every day. Thanks for having me on the show, man.
Hey, for sure, for sure. So, Jim, I'm going to throw this at you. So, obviously, we didn't have much success when it comes to New England last year. Tom Brady now leaves New England. What's left, buddy? What's going to happen with New England this year from a real life NFL and from a fantasy NFL?
Well, certainly Stidham is going to win the NFL Offensive Player of the Year. I think that's a given right now because you know that Belichick will make that happen.
Throwing the flag.
But I mean, as far as Edelman and White, I mean, geez, their value in my mind just plunges because they're not going to have that connection with Tom Brady anymore. And you think Edelman's also he's 34, and so it's just everything is so up in the air with this offense. I don't think there's any way I would touch them for fantasy this year because you really don't know what's going to happen right now. I mean, it could be Brian Hoyer as the quarterback. I mean, what does that do to the value of any fantasy asset?
Yeah.
On that team? I mean, it's Belichick is a genius, but I'm not sure it's going to translate to any fantasy goodness this year for this team outside of maybe the defense. I still like the defense.
Well, the defense better pick it up, I'll tell you, or they better keep going because that offense just ain't sitting pretty. So the biggest offseason news thus far that we have seen, and frankly, this is one of the biggest noise that I have seen of the recent offseason, is DeAndre Hopkins of Houston was traded with a 4th-round draft pick for David Johnson, not just David Johnson, a 2nd-round draft pick. Wait a minute. Not just a 2nd, a 4th. No salary retention. Okay, I'm throwing the flag to that. O'Brien is absolutely insane. He should go back to coaching. Michael's bouncing his head. Give me something, buddy.
I just want to say, I think Bill O'Brien is that guy that everyone loves to have in their fantasy league that would just come up with like the most ridiculous trade offers and they'll just send them to you and you're like, wait, are they actually sending me this? You have to hit send and accept it before the rest of your league mates get an offer as well. And then everyone's just pissed at you because you were the one that got to talk to him first. I mean, and we'll get to the other receiver trade later, but just in terms of value, I mean, even if DeAndre Hopkins is less than what he was in the Texans, there's still no way that this wasn't a tremendous deal for the Cardinals. Being able to upgrade their receiver position, give Kyler Murray a big guy on the outside, what he needed really badly. Larry Fitzgerald is definitely aged. He's pretty consistent, but he can't play that X role anymore. And then Christian Kirk is not meant to be the alpha receiver there. So getting Kyler Murray a true stud receiver and basically just swapping contracts. I think they're like $1 million different. There's no way you're going to find someone comparable to DeAndre Hopkins in the 2nd round of the draft. So I don't see how this doesn't work out for them unless DeAndre Hopkins turns into Antonio Brown and goes off the deep end.
I tell you what, when that went down, my co-host Jake, which I wish he was with us here tonight, we were talking to each other and we thought there was something else coming. Like, Rappaport doesn't really know what's going on. There's got to be something else coming. And the news just kept trickling in. And no, they're actually getting more than just David Johnson. They're not keeping any salary. That is a very weird fantasy. Basically, if anybody did that in our league, I'd be busting down my home league. I'd be kicking in their door, wanting to see their text messages and see if there's any sort of collusion. Limelight, you're shaking your head. You want to speak?
Yeah, man. I was baffled by the news, man. I have no idea what the Texans' game plan is or why they would do what they did, man. I honestly feel bad for Deshaun Watson. The guy just lost an elite wide receiver, and it seems like he doesn't know why it happened either. Didn't really see it coming. I don't understand the trade at all, but for the Cardinals, man, they got to steal, and I like that offense a lot this season. And I was originally thinking they would pick someone like C.D. Lamb in the draft or something like that, but now I think it was a great move for them because they get DeAndre Hopkins, and maybe now they can bolster that offensive line, help protect Kyler Murray, help create more running lanes for Kenyon Drake. I liked it a lot for the Cardinals, but just like everybody else, it was crazy for the Houston Texans. I'm not sure what they were thinking.
Yeah, Lamb is my dude. You know, yeah, appreciate that limelight. Lamb's my dude. I wouldn't mind seeing him on the Texans, but of course he might not last that far. But I tell you what, let me tell you something here. When it comes down to Hopkins, I don't think he's going to be as successful as he was in Houston. I have a feeling that our boy Fantasy Maverick has something to say about that. Why don't you give us something?
Well, yeah, I mean, Hopkins had a 29% target share in Houston, and it's pretty easy to see why. There wasn't anybody else. I mean, Fuller couldn't stay on the field. Hyde doesn't catch passes. And so now he's going into an air raid system where they're going to run 5 receivers or 4 receivers and Drake. And I just don't see how he gets that sort of target share. He's obviously still going to be a late first round pick. I think he's a poor choice because of that downside risk. But I'll tell you, on the flip side, Christian Kirk, in my eyes, his value has shot up because he is going to be it's just like the situation when OBJ joined Cleveland last year. I didn't like OBJ, but all of a sudden Jarvis Landry was the guy. I'm like, you got to get this guy because now defenses are going to have to focus on the 1, and the 2 is going to be open more often. He's going to be more productive, and that's exactly what happened. I see that happening here as well. So definitely, I think Kirk is the biggest winner of this entire transaction.
Well, I like that analysis. I think Kyler Murray is the biggest winner of this transaction for sure. I mean, you give that young pup something more to throw to, he ain't gonna complain. Michael, what's up, buddy?
Now, I want to say I actually agree with Jim on this one. I saw a lot of people saying that they thought this hurt Christian Kirk, and I never really understood the rationale for that. Exactly what Jim was saying. Christian Kirk is not meant to be the 1. He's still a really good receiver. He has rapport with Kyler Murray already. DeAndre Hopkins is coming in and relearning the system. So I think this really does help Christian Kirk out a lot. And we do typically see that receivers, when they go to a new system, they're not as productive. So I agree with you. I think that Hopkins, while I don't think you'll see like a massive drop to his production, it definitely will take a small drop. And one other thing that we really just have to kind of keep in mind right now is how long players will actually be away from each other on the field, and based on everything that's going on in the world right now. If there is an extended downtime where these new signings don't actually get an opportunity to play with their new guys, it could make things really hard for them to get onto the same page. So hopefully they'll be able to actually spend a whole training camp together. But that was kind of, you mentioned OBJ. OBJ basically missed the entire summer because of that injury he was dealing with. So the first time we really saw him on the field was about the same time that he was actually beginning to play with Baker Mayfield. So if this lingers and there's not a lot of off-season, on-field activity, you could see a similar situation here with Hopkins and Murray.
Yeah, and that's a caveat that is going to affect all of these changing teams. This is one of the situations where it pays to follow. It pays to find out what's going on in the fantasy community, in the NFL community, at all of the times, because a lot of people are just going to expect the same thing to happen as last year. If you have followed us for as long as we have, you would know that essentially anytime a big name gets traded, I always say take a step back, because the rest of the NFL, the rest of your leagues, everybody is super excited about that. They want to see the hot new ticket. They want to get the sizzle on that steak, but you don't really know what's going to happen. Wait to find out. Everyone else is going to be running that draft board, putting on those auction dollars. So that was some really, really good information. When it comes down to David Johnson, though, I think this helps David Johnson. Obviously, how could it not? You know what I mean? But I've got David Johnson now as the top 18 running back. Now, obviously, Houston does not throw as much as they did, but I do believe that Bill O'Brien is going to prove that, hey, I got something out for – he's taking a lot of heat. So he's going to want to go ahead and prove that he got something out of his trade. Does anybody have anything to add to that?
Well, I think the big question is what happens to Duke Johnson and Carlos Hyde?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if it's all three of those guys in the backfield, you're talking a timeshare nightmare. You don't want anything to do with that for fantasy. But I do expect at least Carlos Hyde to be cut. And he might cut. And if Duke Johnson gets cut, then you're talking about a lead back, 3-down situation. But even so, man, DJ, he's 29, which is kind of like that's kind of over the hill for fantasy, for running backs in general.
Sure.
So unless I can get him at an incredible bargain in the draft, I think I would just steer clear of that for the time being.
Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. Someone speak up here. Is Carlos Hyde still on their roster?
As far as I know, I think he's actually a free agent right now. What was crazy, you guys may have heard this as well, before they made this trade, apparently Carlos Hyde had actually received a contract offer from them, to which he declined.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's going to end up keeping him out of a job altogether, but my bet right now would be they go into the season with David Johnson, Duke Johnson, and maybe they'll address that position in the draft as well, because apparently Bill O'Brien loves running backs.
Yeah, and let's be straight here. At the moment, Houston does not have a lot of wide receiver options. They did sign Cobb. The hamstring brothers, they run so fast they just run right out of their legs, so they're off the field quite a bit. Maybe David Johnson lines up as wide receiver, which he did 20-some-odd% of the time in his stint under the last regime for Arizona. Speaking of running back changes, we had the Rams cut Todd Gurley, and he signs with Atlanta. I want to go to my man Limelight here. He has the Atlanta jersey going on. I mean, he's clearly a Falcon fan. What do you think on this?
Yeah, originally, man, I didn't like it when I first saw that we signed him, but then I saw that it was a 1 year, $5 million deal, and I like it. I don't like it for Todd Gurley from a real life standpoint because it's a prove it deal, which means he has to come in and show he's still a top dog, which means very likely he could hurt himself again just trying to prove that he deserves it. You know what I mean? But I do like it for the Falcons. It's not a whole lot of risk with a small deal. They may still address it in the draft, maybe a Cam Akers or something. And
yeah. I respect that. Go ahead and hit the mute on that, my friend. Let's throw it over to our man Maverick. What do we got?
Well, I got to say, as far as Gurley is concerned, I see his ceiling as kind of the same as Marshawn Lynch when he went to Oakland. So they're going to be managing his reps. I'm thinking maybe 200 carries is his ceiling. And because of that, I can see something where it's like 700 yards rushing, 7 or 8 touchdowns, and then some passing. That's kind of the X factor because he obviously is a better pass catcher than Lynch was. But still, there's at his current expected draft position, which is somewhere in the 3rd round, I wouldn't take him. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I agree with that unequivocally. Obviously we are from Missouri. The Rams have spent a lot of time in Missouri. Gurley was one of our favorite guys for years. How could he not be? I'm a fan of the Rams. I was born and raised in Southern California. Before they moved to St. Louis, my father and we went to all sorts of different games, so it's a nostalgic thing. Obviously, I moved to Missouri and became a fan, started working in the sports industry around here. So I have affinity for Gurley. And so without sensation, I will say, though, even though I love the guy, he struggled. He was like a battleship doing a 3-point turn last year. And do you think McVay really wanted to lose? I mean, let's call it what it is. Do you think McVay really wanted to lose? I mean, he wanted to put himself in a position to succeed. I know he said all the right things. He said that this is on me. I didn't play him enough. But if you watched the games, you knew that Todd Gurley just wasn't involved. Not only that, he seemed to check out mentally when it came. He was in the limelight quite a bit, talking quite a bit about what he wanted to do after his career. The Rams voted him out of captaincy, and they certainly didn't pat him on the back on the way out. Maybe Atlanta, maybe he'll want to prove the Rams wrong. I'm sure he will, and Atlanta will run him into the ground, no doubt about it. The Maverick made a good point as to average draft position, third round. I'm not a fan there. He's a DFS guy. His hands slipped. His concentration slipped. He is a goal line threat. What do you think about that, Michael?
Yeah, I'm with you guys as well. I think this is going to be one of those we're really going to have to wait and see what happens in the draft before we give a final destination for his ADP. If they do nothing for the rest of the free agency and they don't address this position at all, I mean, we can say that they're going to try to split touches, but who are they going to give them to? Edo Smith and Brian Hill? I mean, as much as Gurley has regressed, he's still a league above those guys in terms of athletic capability. So if they don't do anything to this position at all, I think what you guys are saying is exactly true. They're going to run him into the ground, but if he can stay upright for 16 games, that's going to be a valuable fantasy asset. But my guess is that they don't leave that running back depth chart the way that it is now. And in a few weeks, we'll be having a different conversation about his ADP. But assuming he would be the only guy on the roster, back into the third, I'd take him. If this is the way that the roster looks, I mean, like you mentioned, he's a goal line threat. We know that they threw the ball to Devonta Freeman. He had 4.2 receptions per game last year, which really only had 2.1. So even if his touchdowns go down, because it's hard to repeat getting 14 touchdowns, if he has more receptions, then he could very likely be more productive than Devonta Freeman was. He looked even more washed than Gurley did last year.
Yeah, you mentioned something that is important. Really, how did Freeman do last year? Not well. How did any of those guys do when they had multiple people in their backfield? Not well. Of recent time. Okay, gun to your head. The three of you, we're going to go down the line. Gun to your head. Boom. We're going to go Maverick. Where would you draft Todd Gurley as everything is today?
I would probably consider him if I'm at late fourth, early fifth round. I think he'd be good as a flex option this year.
Got it. Limelight, what do you got?
I think I'll take him early fourth, maybe late third. I'll take him if there's no added guys to the backfield.
And Michael, you said third round. You sticking with that third, fourth round?
Yeah, end of the third, depending on who ends up falling. I think if I go wide receiver or I take like a Kittle or a Kelsey early, I think that the end of the third is the gamble.
All right, I like that. I'm actually right there, fourth round. He's going to get his touchdowns. We know Hooper's also gone, which was a touchdown magnet from last year. So more red zone reps to a guy such as Todd Gurley. Stephon Diggs, he was traded from Minnesota to Buffalo for a first-round draft pick, for 4 draft picks. 4 draft picks. Way better trade than Hopkins. Michael, hit me.
Way better trade for a player that I hate to throw crap on Stephon Diggs, but definitely isn't the same caliber. But that's how you make a trade for a star caliber receiver.
Yeah,
the Texans don't have a first round pick for either this year or next year, and now they don't have DeAndre Hopkins. Sorry, I just keep going back to the Texans. From a player standpoint, like I said, I really like Stephon Diggs. I know a lot of people are throwing a lot of crap at him because he's becoming that quote-unquote diva receiver that everyone likes to get mad at when receivers get angry. Seems like they pick on the receivers more than they do when quarterbacks get angry, but that's a different story. I'm going to throw a little shade on Stephon Diggs, and I want you guys to give me the counter-argument if you have one, unless you agree with me. So last year, Josh Allen only threw 3,089 yards. The Bills passed on 52.5% of their plays, which is the 7th lowest in the NFL. So the run-first team, I don't think they're wanting to change that by any means. A lot of that has to do with the fact that Josh Allen runs the ball a lot. Josh Allen was actually 35th, and there's only 32 teams, but 35th in accuracy overall in 2019, 33rd in deep ball completion, even though he attempted the 8th most deep balls. Stephon Diggs is another one of those seam stretcher guys, but they already have one of those with John Brown. I feel like we have another similar situation here. We have a Curtis Samuel and Robbie Anderson. Now we have a John Brown and a Stephon Diggs, two guys that aren't like your prototypical Julio Jones, DeAndre Hopkins type alpha receivers that like to go deep. I just feel like they're just going to end up eating into each other's targets. And we have a quarterback that isn't confident going deep down the field, isn't accurate going deep down the field. I just don't see this working out well outside of like best ball. What do you guys think?
Well, in regards to that, I feel like you've got my analysis spot on. It seems like Brown and Diggs are somewhat redundant. They seem like they have somewhat of similar skill sets. Now, I will say Brown is a little bit more of a dog in him than Diggs. He'll go and attack that ball a little bit more. But when it comes to Josh Allen, you got a guy who, like you mentioned, he airs it out, but he doesn't air it out well. He's got the Brett Favre mentality where he wants to make the big play, the Jameis Winston mentality where he wants to make the big play and basically the check downs and all the intermediate stuff are out the window. Limelight, I saw you looking up at the rain. Are we looking good, or you want to chime in?
I think chime in just a second. Just calm down just a tad.
Hit me.
Yeah, I agree, man. I've been doing a lot of mock drafts lately, and obviously running back's important this year in your mock drafts. But I've been seeing a lot of people end up with Stephon Diggs as their wide receiver one, and that's not a situation I'd be comfortable with at all. I like him, but I don't really like him as a wide receiver one in fantasy this season.
Yeah, again, players change. They change their uniforms, and everybody goes crazy. Let everybody else sort that out for you. Fantasy Maverick, give me something.
Well, Diggs was constantly complaining last season that he wasn't getting enough volume. And so what happens? He goes to a team which is another run-first, low-volume pass offense. Yeah. How long do you think this honeymoon is going to last, given that, they're not going to be passing the ball enough to him in his mind, just because they don't pass the ball a lot. So I think there could be problems there. I'm not really interested in Diggs at all. I do like John Brown for the same reason that I like Christian Kirk. He's going to take heat off of Brown. Brown will be open more often because of that, and I think he'll be very productive as a result. So that's kind of where I'm at with that whole situation.
Absolutely, 100% when it comes to that. At the very least, Diggs is going to be a fantastic decoy. He's going to open up one side of the field. You're going to have to be able to stay true when it comes to the pass. So maybe you get Singletary freed up. Josh Allen, maybe he'll get up on the outside and run. We know that guy likes to run. A couple more things. Speaking of guys who likes to run, we got this guy named Melvin Gordon. He joined this team called the the Denver Broncos. I have no idea what's going on in Denver. Somebody help me out. I'm gonna go with Jim, the fantasy football maverick, because it seems like you've got some pretty good analysis on this stuff so far.
Well, my first initial reaction was why. They appeared to be set in the backfield with Lindsey and Freeman. They were doing really good together, and I was looking forward to Lindsey being on his contract year this season, but now Melvin Gordon comes in. That throws a monkey wrench into that whole situation. I just don't see. I guess the main reason why Melvin Gordon took this position was because he wanted to play against the Chargers twice this year. It's like a revenge thing for him. He said he turned down a higher priced offer. I don't understand. I mean, it's just
straight from the donkey, the jackass's mouth,
Yes. And so I think I might still be willing to take a chance on Lindsey as a late round pick, as a mid to late round pick, which I expect him to fall. But, it's just not something you want for fantasy. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And Lindsey is the ideal late round draft pick because, he did good where he's at. And at the very least, even if Melvin Gordon eats, Lindsey's going to be fine in the 6th, 7th, 8th. Well, I shouldn't say 6th or 7th, the 8th round. Michael, you're shaking your head. What's up, buddy?
No, I agree with what your guys' take is on Lindsey. And honestly, I don't know that this hurts him that much. Lindsey isn't the body type or the build that you want being a 3-down back. And you saw last year, like, it felt like they were just doing everything they could to get him to 1,000 yards, and he would just wear down by the time the end of the game was there. So I think this is actually good for him. He's actually going to be able to play more of that Eckler type role, which we saw 2 years ago before Gordon's whole contract holdout situation. Both Gordon and Eckler were both valuable fantasy assets. Now, I think a lot of this is riding on how good of an offense the Broncos can actually be. Can Drew Lock take a step forward, which I think he showed some promise last year. And if the Broncos end up having a pretty decent offense, then I think Melvin Gordon will have enough value just from most likely getting goal line carries. But he's not been the picture of health by any means. So grabbing Lindsey in the later rounds just in case Melvin Gordon ends up getting hurt, that's a great lottery ticket pick.
Yeah, in case he gets hurt. Heck, in case he underperforms. Gun to your head. Gun to your head. Limelight. Does Melvin Gordon get 1,000 yards this year rushing?
I'm going to say no.
No.
I'm going to say no.
Fantasy Maverick.
Well, if Gordon gets injured, then yes. Gordon misses some games.
So the question is, does Melvin Gordon get 1,000 rushing yards?
Oh, does Melvin Gordon get 1,000 rushing yards?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't count on it.
So that's the gun. Michael, Fantasy Addiction.
I'll go contrarian. I'll say yes, but barely.
Yes, but barely. Okay. I've got the under on that. So now we have Phillip Rivers, who left the team that Melvin Gordon was at. It was a straight-up exodus out of Southern California this year. Phillip Rivers goes to Indianapolis. They tell our man risk it to get the brisket. They say, sorry, not good enough. But we have this old man with like 19 kids. He wants to get out of the house a little bit and chuck the football a little bit more. So do you think that that's a good signing from Indianapolis' standpoint? Limelight. That off. We're cutting you off, Limelight. Sorry that, buddy. Jim, hit me.
I got to say, this trade thrills me as much as Joe Flacco getting signed by the Broncos last year. It's at best a lateral move. There is nothing about Rivers and that's any better than Jacoby Brissett. And what I see here is an endless quarterback controversy where Rivers will get named the starter. He'll play a couple of games. He will struggle. So they'll bench him and they'll put Brissett struggle, and then so they go back to Rivers again later in the season, and maybe one more time back to Brissett, and in the end, next year they just draft a new quarterback. That's kind of how I see it going this year, and I don't want anything to do with Indianapolis as a result of that.
Strong. Michael, hit me.
Well, I definitely agree. I wouldn't want anything to do with Phillip Rivers on my fantasy team, but I'll give the contrarian point of view that I feel like Phillip Rivers is kind of like that older version of what we were praising Jameis Winston for doing earlier, is just putting your team in bad situations and therefore having to come back and throw the ball a lot. So while I don't think this helps the Colts too much from like just a team perspective, I think this helps the fantasy assets of guys like T.Y. Hilton, Paris Campbell, maybe even Nyheim Hines. We'll see if maybe he can jump into that kind of like Eckler-like role. But I think this will lift the volume of the passing game up. Jacoby Brissett looked all right the first couple games and just really dwindled as the season went on. So if they let Phillip Rivers play the season out, which if you pay a guy $25 million and you don't, I don't know what you're doing with your team. But even if he's losing games, he's setting you up for a better draft pick next year. You might as well just let him ride into the sunset. But I think Phillip Rivers has enough in him to sustain value around him. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on guys like T.Y. Hilton and Paris Campbell right now.
Yes, Fantasy Addiction. I love you in a weird way. That is exactly where I'm at. We love a guy like Jameis Winston who just chucks the rock without thinking about everything. If you're a wide receiver on his team, and you got guys like T.Y., don't call me Ty Hilton, who, look at this man has three hands. He goes up and he attacks that ball. He goes deep. That's what Phillip Rivers is going to do. You give him 1 year, I might be more interested in T.Y. Hilton this year. In fact, I have him on a sleeper list, which that sounds crazy to say T.Y. Hilton as a sleeper this year, but that I have him over there. Line, thumbs up, thumbs down, good to go. Thumbs down, thumbs down. Do you do this? Give us the thumbs up. Do you like the fantasy ramifications of Phillip Rivers in Indianapolis?
I like it for T.Y. Hilton. If he can stay healthy, he has a lot of upside.
Yes, and okay, so let me just throw everybody a quick question. While I have you, it seems like the rain is down. How about the running backs when it comes to Indy? Does this help, hurt, or keep the same? Stay the same?
I think it helps him. Phillip Rivers, he likes to dump it off. I think it does help him a good bit.
Check down, my friend. Check down. Fantasy Maverick, what do you think?
Well, Marlon Mack is on a contract year, so I like him automatically. It would be nice to see Nyheim Hines get more involved. He was completely uninvolved last year, though. That concerns me, just from a game planning standpoint. But it's I think Mack is certainly worth it at his ADP right now.
Yep, fantasy addiction.
Yeah, I like Mac probably around the same range that we had Gurley near the end of the third round. I mean, until he got hurt last year, he was actually running really well. Doesn't play too much in the passing game. And as you just said, Maverick, Nyheim Hines wasn't really involved in the game script last year, but 2 years ago under the same coaching system, he was involved a lot with Andrew Luck. So we know Phillip Rivers likes to check it down to his running back. So I think Nyheim Hines is a decent, really late round sleeper right now. Could end up returning a lot more value. People have kind of forgotten about him because of his sour year last year.
Oh, 100%. I think Mac, I love him in the third round. He's my guy that I am really, really targeting in the third round this year. As you mentioned, check down king, Mr. Phillip Rivers. If that ball is not up and out, and if someone is not coming up in the middle, check down first down, check down second down, check down third down. And even if Mac can't catch the ball that well, someone's got to catch those first, second down checks. So you know what? This was fantastic. I really appreciate you guys coming out and helping us break down these 6 topics. You know, has anybody ever seen the movie or read the book Time Machine by H.G. Wells? Just if you had, no, okay. Forget it then. I feel like with this quarantine, I feel like we'll all become cave trolls, like going underground and we come out like we're going to be these nasty little creatures and everything. This has really got me down. Not being able to go out, not being able to go get some fast food, go out and get a beer. Jake and I, we love our beers, but this is nice to be able to have a panel of guys that I respect. It's important for us to be able to keep everybody lifted up, to keep things to people that are excited about. And that's the thing about the NFL. It's not baseball is not America's game anymore. The NFL is America's game, and we're glad to have you guys over here on a very weird fantasy football. Let's run by you guys real quick. Give us another outro where we could find you. Let's start real quick with Lime. Are you ready, Lime? Or you want us to let you on the way out? All right, hit me, baby. All right, let's.
Raining pretty hard.
Okay, so let's go Maverick. Let's get Maverick. Where can we find you one more time?
Well, again, I do have a website. It's called fantasyfootballmaverick.com. I invite you to go there and check it out. I also have on Instagram at Jimmy Maverick. That's Jimmie Maverick. And I do have a YouTube page as well under the same name. So I post stuff there all the time onto both those things.
Love it. Love it. Fantasy Addiction, hit me.
Predominantly on YouTube at the Fantasy Addiction Network, and then also fantasyaddictionnetwork.com. Those are the main 2 places. Also on Instagram at _fantasy_addiction network. But right now, mostly just focused on YouTube and the website, so hit me up there.
Yeah, and it would be nice for us all, this brotherhood here, to maybe join each other's channels, check it all out. So maybe you'll be seeing our faces on each other's channels, because that's what we're all about. Of course, that you can find us, Very Weird Fantasy Football, anywhere where you consume your podcasts. Obviously, you're on YouTube right now, so like, subscribe, share, comment, tell us how well you love us, or if you hate us, just maybe don't say anything, but like us anyway. We wish you all a wonderful night. Stay safe. Thank you, guys. And don't forget to be weird, everybody.